Oh, sorry. Is this scaring you? No? Well, it freaks them out. It's no secret that cats are afraid of loud noises. They have sensitive hearing, so that big old contraption overwhelms their ears. But I like to think they're scared of it because it looks like a big snake. It does make you wonder though, what they really think of vacuums. Do they see them as monsters or bigger animals? If so, that means they probably get nightmares about them. Right? That's the rabbit hole I went into trying to figure out what kind of cat game I wanted to make. For the past few months of trying out Pico 8, I felt like it was time to make a small finished game. I knew I wanted it to be cat related, but trying to come up with a full design concept was quite difficult without a clear idea on what the type of game I wanted it to be like. So I scrapped all my concepts and worked on figuring out the gameplay loop. It had to be simple and straightforward, like using only one map so I don't have to worry too much about level design. I was going back and forth between a puzzle type game and a wave shooter, and eventually settled on the latter. With the genre in mind, we are back to the design concept featuring this guy. So my idea was simple. The game would take place in a cat's dream where it would run around its house fighting against evil vacuums by spitting hairballs. I think you can guess how I got that idea. Booting up Pico 8, I started with the playable cat and implementing its movement controls. Before continuing further, I solidified my core gameplay mechanics so that I have a clear picture on what to work on. Since it was gonna be a wave shooter, I ended up with this loop. The cat would go against a wave of vacuums to survive, but to add a bit of a challenge, the hairballs would have a limited quantity. To replenish it, the player would have to stop and lick itself to get more hairballs, leaving them vulnerable to enemy projectiles. So it would be spit, lick, repeat. The first hurdle I faced was making the hairball shooting feel good. Getting it to fire at the right speed and set it so that it fires from the cat's mouth was a challenge. Also, I didn't want it to fire straight like a beam, so in its Y position when shooting, I added the random function between a couple of integers so that it gives off a good spread, just enough so it won't be inaccurate. With the hairball spitting working, adding the hairball limit was next. That was fairly simple. A variable with a count for the maximum hairballs that's available and deduct from the count for every shot fired. Next was the leaking. The player shouldn't be able to move when they're reloading, so with an if condition, if the reload button is pressed, input from the arrow keys wouldn't do anything. Just like deducting the count of the hairball, reloading the hairballs runs basically the same in reverse. With enemies to tackle next, I originally thought of making different types of vacuum enemies, but realizing that might be too ambitious, I just opted for one enemy type, a classic vacuum. The next challenge I faced was developing the enemy's behavior. This was definitely the hardest part of the project. I wanted the vacuum to chase the player when they get too close. The initial shooting and chasing felt super clunky, and it didn't help that it was using a function that I had just learned. Turns out I had swapped the order of the X and Y in the 10-2 function, which completely messed up the angle value, causing the clunky movement. Yeah, definitely didn't take too long to find that mistake. Since the game would take place in a house, the map would be fairly big, so I implemented the camera system to follow the player like one of my previous test games. Now at this point it's already been a couple of days, and looking at an empty map that long is pretty boring, so I think it's time for the map design. I sketched out a rough layout on what the map should look like to get an idea of the furniture sprites I would need, and the size of the overall map. Then I started with some placeholders first to work on the collision logic, and since I was already messing around with the enemy and player's logic, I figured might as well work on the hitbox function. The vacuums will be deleted after getting hit by 3 hairballs, and for the cat, logically would be 9, because, you know, 9 lives. Now it's a wave shooter, so 2 vacuums definitely won't cut it. The easiest way I could think of making vacuums randomly spawn was to design identical tiles and mark a flag with it. Those tiles would be set as a spawn point for the vacuums. So for each wave by random, a few of these tiles would spawn a vacuum. With the core loop completed, everything is now coming together, so now was adding the final touches. I added the movement and lick animation for the cat, so no more static sprites. Also created red silhouettes of the player and enemy as hit indicators. It will feel weird to start the game just like that, so I made a simple main menu screen to start from, and a game over screen when the cat loses all its lives with a score tracker. Lastly, the icing on the cake was the sound effects and music, which I learned I suck at doing, so we're not gonna talk about that, but after painfully completing it, the game was done. It felt really satisfying to complete it, and I uploaded it on itch.io so anyone can try it out. Just wish my cats could. I definitely need a break. The game took about 2 weeks to finish, which was way longer than I had expected. Imagine if I had made a Pico 8 game in 2 days instead.